Good afternoon. Welcome to the sixth and the last lecture of the Science and Society series organized by Paraspar of Office of Communication, Indian Institute of Science. Paraspar, as some of you might be knowing, is an initiative by the Office of Communications of Indian Institute of Science that facilitates discussions around knowledge systems. And we have had two lecture series so far. First was on joy of discovery of science, and this was on science and society. Here we have had speakers from various fields, talking to us and sharing the experiences and the knowledge they have gathered in their field. We have had people who were working on oral history and history of science, ecology, and scientists who are working with community have spoken to us, have given their lectures so far. And today we have Dr. Shreya Ghosh from Indian Bioscience, and she will be speaking on harnessing the power of community in science. And before we start, I would like to give a brief introduction of the speaker today. Shreya is currently the program manager for science communication at India Bioscience, an organization that aims to act as a catalyst to enable change in the culture and practice of doing science in India. At India Bioscience, Shreya solicits, edits, and writes science news and features articles, and participates in coordinating various other projects, including publications, skill building, workshops, webinars, and podcasts. She has several years of experience as a science communicator and a PhD in life sciences from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Mumbai. So we welcome Shreya to give us her lecture, and we'll have a couple of questions after the lecture, and we request audience to either type in your question in the chat box or raise your hand, and I'll call out your name and you can ask your question. Shreya.
Thank you, Bethesda, for that introduction. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Just tell me if my screen is visible.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. Let me just begin here. Okay, so hello, good afternoon. I'm going to talk about communities today and the role they play in science. And my talk today, I decided to divide it into two parts. In the first part, I will be talking about some of the complex ways in which science and society interact with each other and what role communities play in this interaction. In the second half of the talk, I will talk about India Bioscience, the organization that I work for, and I will discuss some of the ways in which this organization, over the last 12 years or so, has attempted to build and empower the life science community in India. So when I was asked to speak in this series, I got to thinking about the ways in which science and society interact. I mean, it's easy perhaps to list the many ways in which science or the outputs of science have an impact on society, whether that be through medicine or agriculture or energy or technology, or even just pushing the boundaries of human exploration, right? At the same time, society also obviously has an influence on the progress of science. Most of science is funded by taxpayer money. It is regulated by public policy, and many of the problems that science is often directed towards solving are global in nature. So perhaps it is a relationship that can be described as a give and take, sort of a mutual exchange model, or basically a way in which the two can benefit from each other. But then I got to thinking a bit more. And if we were to look back and glance at this overly simplified view of the history of science, there are obviously individual contributions that jump out at us. works of astounding brilliance or genius, right? But at the same time, when I look at this picture, I also think about Plato's debates in Athens, debates in Plato's Academy in Athens. I think about the lifelong partnership between Pierre and Marie Curie. I think about the discourses that must have happened in Nalanda and Takshashila. I think about Darwin and Huxley and the Wallace and their continuing debates. And the conclusion that emerges from all of this is very different. It's the fact that science is a social enterprise. It is not an individual endeavor. And what this means is that science is, in a way, it's embedded within our society. You cannot separate out the two from each other. They are interlinked irrevocably, right? And science is a part of society, and this also leads to this corollary that science is a human enterprise. Scientists are humans, and what this means is that this picture that we often tend to have of scientists as these eccentric geniuses working in their basements, this does not reflect reality. Scientists are people. They're like you or me. They're basically a part of society. They have inner lives, they have their own experiences, they have their own worldviews. And this must be taken into account whenever we are thinking about or planning anything related to the practice of science. So, who are these people? As an example, let's just take the Indian scientific, the academic community, right? At the center of it, there are researchers. So researchers, again, can come in many forms and varieties. There are independent researchers who are usually faculty at research institutes or universities. They're also called PIs or principal investigators. A lot of the actual work, experimental work, particularly in the sciences, is done by graduate students and postdoctoral fellows. So these are PhD or MSc students and people who have completed their PhD but are not independent researchers yet. There are technicians. Many a lab owes their existence to them. Many a finding owes its existence to them. And there are short-term fellows, assistants, interns who also contribute to the experiments or the theoretical breakthroughs that result in the progress of science. So these are the researchers. However, this picture is not complete because the researchers depend upon a galaxy of individuals who are necessary for the scientific enterprise, whether that be science administrators, grants managers, facility managers, communicators, educators, intellectual property advisors, policymakers, and even technology transfer specialists. So researchers cannot function in isolation. None of these other professionals can function in isolation. They have to work together to ensure that any piece of scientific experiment or a project gets taken to its conclusion, right? Again, this is only part of the picture. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is only academia. You also have industry, which has its own plethora of roles and activities, right? A lot of good research takes place within industries as well. In addition to academia and industry, you have the government, you have funding agencies. The government itself funds a lot of research, but you also have independent funding agencies. You have bodies that set up regulatory guidelines for research. You have societies, formal societies of researchers. You have non-profit organizations. You have publishers who help bring the output of science into a form that can be consumed by everybody. Together, and again, this picture also is not exhaustive. It's very possible I have gotten a few nodes here and there. But overall, they form what can be called the scientific ecosystem, right? And even this does not present the full picture, because wherever you have a system as complex as this, there are layers and layers of complexity. As I mentioned, scientists are human beings, the organizations are made up of human beings, and there are many, many nuances to the way they function, right? So many things influence the way someone does science in India and the results of those scientific activities. Whether that be the place you are doing science, whether it's in industry or academia, whether within academia you are in a university or you are in an institute like Indian Institute of Science or IISr or TIFR, places like this, your environment changes, the culture changes, and all of these affects the way science is done. There's also the type of research, whether it's theoretical or experimental, basic or fundamental, or applied. Again, that has an influence on the way one would experience the scientific ecosystem. The field or discipline, whether someone is in the physical sciences or biological sciences, or again theoretical sciences, experimental sciences, mathematics, engineering, all of these have an influence. And again, organizations, every organization is, or institute or university is like a kingdom in itself, right? It has its own power structure, its own hierarchies, the way people interact with each other, the way decisions are made. And again, all of these tend to be unique and hence complex. Again, scientists, as people, they come from different backgrounds, they come from different sorts of views. They have families, friends, they are integrated into their own communities. And this again has a big impact on the way one finds themselves in the whole scientific ecosystem. And finally, as individuals, we all have our own past experiences that shape us. And I guess one of the biggest myths related to science is that scientists are rational creatures who are 100% objective and who don't have any biases. That's simply not true. You cannot eliminate bias. You cannot eliminate the way your whole thought structure has been shaped by your upbringing or by your experiences, but it helps to be aware of them. So altogether, this presents a picture that is complex at many, many levels. And what such a system leads to are challenges that are also complex, that also need to be solved at many, many different levels. So when it comes to challenges faced by the scientific ecosystem, by the community, they can be solved at many different levels, right? There can be the national level, at the level of policy. So regulatory bodies or the government, or they can set down rules and laws and regulations that everybody has to follow. And that can be a top-down approach to solving problems. And in many cases, this is quite effective, but it takes time. There's also institutional level. As mentioned, universities, institutes often behave autonomously, and they are uniquely aware of their own challenges or the uh, microcosm of challenges that they have to deal with. So enacting policies at an institutional level can also be used to solve problems. Thirdly, there is the community level, where individuals come together in a bottom-up approach to solve problems, and we will be talking about this in more detail in today's talk. And the fourth level is the individual level, and this is where every person sort of exercises their own ingenuity to sort of solve the problems that are posed to them. And again, this is uncommon, but there you would be surprised at the things that one or two motivated people, driven people can accomplish. But today we are going to be talking about communities, and while I was researching this talk, I was looking for definitions of community, and this is one that really spoke to me, that a community is a group of people with a common characteristic or interest living together within a larger society. And of course, this fits the scientific ecosystem perfectly because these are all people who have a common interest, which is the pursuit of knowledge, of truth. And they have to be working together in order to achieve that goal. So, what can a community do for a scientist, or why do scientists need this sense of belonging to a community? Uh, an obvious answer that comes to mind is that of collaboration. Science thrives on collaboration and on free and open exchange or sharing of ideas is one obvious way in which communities can help. Uh, Communities can also help scientists inspire and motivate each other, whether again that can stem from the sharing of ideas. It can also come from having or giving people role models to follow. It can come from a healthy sense of competition sometimes. So in many ways, being part of a community can give you that push or motivation that's required to sustain yourself in this challenging field. Many of the problems that we face today in the world are big problems. They are not problems that can be solved by one individual or one organization or even one country, right? This is where the power of collective problem solving comes in, and the scientific community, if it works together, it has the power to bring this to fruition. Also, much of the aim of science is centered around creation of new knowledge. And if this knowledge is shared, if there is a common repository of knowledge that anyone can draw from, it makes life much easier for scientists as well as common individuals like us. And the creation of such a knowledge base is another way in which communities can help scientists. And finally, this one is maybe not as intuitive as the others, but for science to be effective, for scientific inquiry to be effective, it is necessary that scientists have the freedom to question each other, to criticize each other, to scrutinize findings, to hold each other, to hold data, to hold theories to a very high standard of accuracy. And again, having a community of peers who are willing to look through your work and give feedback is very, very, very important in this regard. So I guess we can agree at this point that having a strong, close-knit community is important for scientists. It is something that can give a big advantage to scientists. But that does not mean that this process is easy, right? In a country as diverse as India, as big as India, you have challenges. And again, these are not specific to India. Every country in the world faces them. But what are these challenges? Obviously, with diversity, which is a great benefit, diversity provides a lot of benefits when it comes to doing science, but it also brings differences in ways of thinking, in ways of approaching problems, and that can be a challenge for community building if these differences are not bridged by effective communication. And these differences also lead to the formation of silos. These again, like islands, or you might have heard the phrase ivory towers, where groups of individuals sort of shut themselves off from the outer world and they form echo chambers. And this severely restricts the creativity or the capacity of that group for more better progress in science. Bureaucracy, administrative hurdles, communication gaps. These are always there. Um, there can be differences in the distribution of resources as well as differences in the actual availability of resources. And finally, all of these can lead to this phenomenon of voicelessness, where individuals, where people doing science may feel as if their voices don't matter, that they are invisible, that no one takes them seriously, or that their problems don't matter. And this can be very, very damaging, because then we start losing out on talented individuals who are sort of forced out by this feeling of being invisible, right? So solving these challenges would take time, they would take concerted effort, they would take effort at every level, not just at the level of a few individuals or a few organizations, but at a much more broader level. And I guess what I'm going to talk to you for the rest of this talk about is about India Bioscience, which was an experiment in community building that came into existence some 12 years ago. So the way India Bioscience came into being is interesting. It happened over a dinner conversation basically in 2009 or 2008, I don't exactly remember, but around that time, a group of young scientists, after a conference, they were just having an informal dinner meeting together. And they started discussing how in India we have plenty of scientific conferences, we have scientific journals, we have ways in which researchers can discuss their science with each other, and that's great. But what they felt was missing was a platform where researchers can come together to discuss not just the technical aspects of science, but the more social or human aspect of doing science, whether that be how to mentor people, how to receive mentoring, how to manage your lab, how to manage funding, all of these that researchers sort of learn on their own in their first 5 or 10 years on the job, but that nobody takes time out to teach them, right? And out of this conversation was born a meeting called the Young Investigators Meeting. The first edition was in 2009. And that meeting was a runaway success. And after that meeting, these researchers, the organizers of the meeting, they got together and they decided that this cannot be a one-time, one-off event. This has to be sustained. This has to be continued. And that resulted in the creation of India Bioscience, whose job was to act as a catalyst. It was created to fulfill a gap, this gap within the life science sector in India. And the way it does that is it tries to act as a catalyst or as a facilitator to sort of encourage changes in the way science is done in India, in the culture of doing science, in the practice of doing science. And it does it by engaging with academia, with industry, with the government, with policymakers, with various stakeholders, basically at different levels, and sort of bring those viewpoints into a common platform and to act as a one-stop resource. So India Bioscience is funded largely by the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, but we also receive funding from several other sources. And we are a small organization, just 8 of us. We are based in Bangalore right now. We are sort of hosted, incubated within the campus of NCBS, National Center for Biological Sciences. And the community that we serve right now consists of researchers, science professionals, both from academia and industry, educators, a very, very important node, I would say, in the whole science and society ecosystem in India, and students who are going to be the next generation of both of these other categories. So undergraduates, postgraduates, PhD students, they form our community. And in addition to these three, we are very happy to have a lot of people who are maybe not part of the scientific ecosystem directly, but who take a healthy level of interest in science and who want to learn more about science, who are science enthusiasts, so to speak. So they are also a very important part of our community. And the way India Bioscience functions, the way it tries to build communities is by working on these 5 different verticals. And I will talk about them briefly one by one. The first one is networking. So the term networking often receives like a bad rap among scientists who see it as sort of more corporate speak, but it depends on how you define it. And the way we define it is networking allows you to forge strong connections with individuals that serve as a conduit for mutual benefit, right? And the way we do this, so as I mentioned earlier, the Young Investigators meeting is how all of these started. And we used to host this meeting once a year, always at a different location. So this map is actually a couple of years old. After this, we have also had meetings in Guwahati and last year in Mahabalipuram, which was 1 month before the country went into lockdown. So that's when we had our last meeting. And in the Young Investigators meeting, basically, we bring together researchers who are just starting their careers. So faculty who have just set up their labs or postdoctoral fellows who are planning to set up their labs, and they come together, they talk with each other, they talk with mentors, they try to forge these connections, these collaborations, they share ideas, they present their ambitious project plans, and they discuss issues related to doing science in India. And this has been a very, very successful program over the last dozen or so years. But these are national level meetings, they happen once a year. What we recognized about 2 years ago is that India has these pockets, I would say, places like Hyderabad, Bangalore, Kolkata, Mumbai, places that have a high concentration of research institutes and universities and industries. But unfortunately, because of gaps in communication, these institutes and universities don't talk to each other. They don't draw from each other's expertise. They cannot share resources even if they are willing to do so, because they just don't have those communication channels set up. So the regional young investigators meetings came into being on these principles. These are held in a specific geographical region. For example, in Kolkata West, which was held in Jodhpur, in Delhi, and in these researchers sort of come together. They discuss ways in which they can collaborate. They discuss how they can share their infrastructure or equipment or reagents or people, or think about ideas that they can both work on and maybe probably arrive at a shared result together on. So we have had, I think, 5 or 6 of these so far. We are looking forward to more. However, all of this was till February 2020, after which, as we know, the world changed. Meeting up physically, holding these meetings at a physical venue suddenly became impossible. And like the rest of the world, we have also been forced to adapt to an online mode of existence. Thankfully, we already had a few resources going that would help us do this. We have this interactive database of life science researchers on our website, for example. This is an interactive map where each dot represents a group of researchers, and one can filter this map. If somebody is looking for, let's say, a collaborator who is a cell biologist who works on the fly model system, they can filter this map and get this information. And any independent PI or faculty can sign up for this. We have a discussion forum again on our website. This is also open to anybody. Anybody can post a topic and start discussing something as long as it is related to the life science community in India. And finally, we have just experimented on shifting the young investigators meeting to an online mode, and this is actually next week, and we are looking forward to this very eagerly to see how well we can translate the idea of this collective networking to an online mode of existence. Okay, while helping researchers connect to each other through networking is important, it is also necessary to make sure that all of these professionals who are in the scientific ecosystem have the skills necessary to build long-term careers in science. And the way we thought of doing these are through a series of sharing resources, direct workshops, and partnering with various organizations. So the crafting your career with workshops was one such initiative. And again, when you're just thinking about the power of community, the crafting your career workshop came into being because of a coffee conversation between me and my colleagues Smita and Lakshmi at India Bioscience, and all of us got to discussing how, while all three of us have PhDs, we were sort of clueless when it came to navigating our careers post completing the PhD. And we thought it would be important to develop a resource that would allow the next generation of scientists and science professionals to craft their careers, hence the name of this workshop. So this is a full day career development workshop, and it was held in 5 or 6 cities between 2019 and 20. In 2020, after the lockdown, we decided to take this completely online, and we have had over 1,000 participants at these webinars so far in the last 6 months or so. We also have the International Grants Awareness Program. As you know, science relies on the existence of stable funding, and a lot of this, India basically collaborates with a lot of other countries to set up these big grants that are open to Indian nationals as well as to researchers throughout the world. But what is seen often is that the representation of Indian researchers for these grants tends to be quite low, whether that be due to a lack of awareness or due to a lack of confidence in applying, but the representation is low. And this project sort of aims at changing that. It tries to give researchers the confidence to apply for these international grants and get those grants, basically. So again, this takes the form of podcasts, webinars, physical workshops before COVID, infographics, articles. There's a page called the International IGAP on our website, which you can check out if this is something that interests you. We have our webinar series called India Bio Streams and our podcast series called India Bio Speaks. And we use these channels to address ideas or topics that would be of interest to the scientific community, whether that be careers, whether that be grants and funding, or whether that be topics like mental health, of women in science, of gender and minorities, and many other such topics. And there is more. I could go on and on. We have partnered with many organizations over the last few years. British Council, IISc Pune, Cactus Communications, European Molecular Biology Organization. These are just a few of the organizations that we have worked with to bring free skill building workshops to the scientific community in India. And we hope to be able to continue this and to get more and more people to take advantage of these resources. Then we have education, which plays a formative role in ensuring that the next generation of scientists or science professionals have the skills necessary and the knowledge necessary to build a career in science, and also to ensure that scientific temperament is built within the society, whether somebody is part of the scientific ecosystem or not. Access to scientific ways of thinking and what we call scientific temper is very, very necessary. And educators play a crucial role in this. So we have one whole sector of our activities that are dedicated to this sector. We have a page for educators on our website. By educators, the community that we target largely are undergraduate educators. So the thousands and thousands of college professors and teachers who work with young people, basically, who play a very strong motivating role in making sure that these people are integrated into society and into science. So we have a page for educators on our website. We have a database of life science educators with over 4,000 members. And we send a special newsletter to these 4,000 members. Often we publish articles that are relevant to them. We list jobs, grants, events that are available to them. Sometimes we visit colleges directly, we give talks, we interact directly with students and professors, and we try to support conferences and workshops that give educators the opportunity to network and sort of grow their own community, right? And we try to give educators a voice by encouraging them to write about their experiences, the things they have learned about pedagogy, about teaching, about the culture of teaching in India, for example. And these discussions also continue in the forums that I spoke about earlier, where again, educators can post their own threads or start discussing about things like the national education policy or about online classrooms or anything basically that they find important. We also periodically put up resources that can help educators in doing their jobs more easily, perhaps. And that also brings me to our fourth vertical, that is data and policy. And while we are not policymakers ourselves, or we are not data scientists, but we try to facilitate and enable the way, provide a space basically where both of these can be discussed freely. So the Science Policy Forum was one such initiative. This was a collaboration between India Bioscience, the DST Center for Policy Research, and the Sustainable Water Future Program, and later India Alliance as well. And this project, which serves as a space where science policy or anything science policy related can be discussed, was first incubated on India Bioscience, and now it is its own organization. I invite you to go and check out this website. Right now, the Science, Technology and Innovation Policy STIP 2020 is sort of under formation, and if you want to learn more about science policy in India, this is a wonderful resource, and that's the Science Policy Forum. And we also try, since now we have this community of people that we connect to, that we can reach out to, we try to survey them, poll them, try to figure out what is it that they need, where are the gaps. And one outcome of this was this article last year about the mental health crisis that is brewing in academia, and we collected data from almost 1,000 researchers in India, and we collected them into this article. So again, I invite you to go check it out. And we have other surveys that are planned for the future to, again, understand what is going on within the community, where are the gaps, and how we can help fill those gaps. In addition, somewhere researchers often run into problems in India are figuring out where are the opportunities, because these are not advertised so clearly as jobs in other sectors are. You have to go to the websites of specific institutes or funding agencies to find out which are the grants available, what the jobs available, which conference is taking place when, etc. So we wanted to create a single place, sort of a one-stop place where people can come and get all this information. So we have a classified section with grants, jobs, and events on our website where people can come to know of these opportunities, where they can interact with the community. And finally, coming to communication, the final vertical, and this is a vertical that I manage at India Bioscience, and this is also something very close to my heart. Science communication, or SciComm as it is often called, it brings together two distinct approaches. There is science, which is basically a method of investigating the world, systematically asking questions about the world and getting answers based on empirical observations and a rational thought process. And then we have communication. If science builds knowledge, communication makes sure that that knowledge is not restricted to a few individuals. Communication consists of transferring meaning, whether that meaning be in the form of ideas or emotions or facts or opinions. Communication ensures that people are connected through their ideas. And the aim of science communication as a whole in India is manifold. Again, as I think most of you would agree, we need better scientific temper in the society. We need more awareness about science in the society, not just about the fruits of science or about facts about science, but about what the scientific method consists of and how anybody can adopt and apply the same in their lives. And this goes to counter things like misinformation, pseudoscience, superstition. Again, I guess this last year of facing the COVID-19 crisis as a global community has proven to us how widespread this problem is, how problematic this is for the progress of society as a whole. And this is somewhere that science communication, effective science communication, can play a big role. There's also this layer of separation. As I said, most of science is funded by taxpayer money, but those taxpayers never get to learn about the fruits of science because that is hidden behind this sea of jargon or technical terms, so that, or hidden behind paywalls. Straight up, you have to pay to learn about science. And this separation, this gap, is something that science communication can help bridge. And finally, there is the fact that scientists, with a few exceptions perhaps, they don't form a part of the public discourse. You don't see scientists on your TV every day. Maybe you read about them in the newspaper, that's only once in a while. Like, how many scientists can most people count within their circle of acquaintances? So there is this obvious lack of visibility of both the outcomes of science and the people who do science. And this is where India Bioscience decided to come in. The aims of our program was first and foremost to bring visibility to the research that's being done in India and the people who do science in India. It also aims to nurture scientific temper, build awareness, to give a voice to scientists, as I mentioned before. And finally, this is also important to help train a workforce of science communicators, because while scientists talking about their science is important, that is not enough. You need professional science communicators who know how it is to translate science from its technical, jargon-heavy language into something that can be accessible and understood by wide audiences. So the way we do this, to bring visibility, we publish news stories that highlight recent research from India. We publish columns which are sort of feature articles, opinion pieces, more analytical articles that dissect different aspects of doing science in India. We publish articles that are either interviews with science practitioners or written by scientists, whether they be researchers, whether they be PhD students, that share their experiences, basically, where they can talk about how they have reached where they have reached, why they do, what motivates them, what excites them, what do they do in the future, what do they want, what message do they want to give to the community. We feel this is something very, very important, and that is what we want to provide as a platform to the scientific community. Also, science writers or science communicators, they themselves are part of a sort of a sub-community within the whole scientific community. Science communicators have a lot to learn from each other by sharing ideas, sharing resources, asking for feedback. So we have a discussion forum that is dedicated to science communicators in India, and those who are interested in learning more about science communication can come here and discuss the craft of science communication. Also, sometimes we know that there is a lot of motivation to reach out to the public with science. There are many interesting ideas, but sometimes it is lack of resources or lack of funding that stops these ideas from becoming reality. So we had this created this one-of-a-kind grant called the India Bioscience Outreach Grant. And this money is given to scientists not for doing research, but for carrying out a project that would help them bridge the gap between science and society. So the first version of this was held last year. These are the winners, and in each case it was a scientist that teamed up with a professional science communicator to come up with a project that would fill some sort of niche gap in the communication between science and society. We have our publications. All of these are free to download. They're available on our website. They are meant to serve as guides. For example, Disha is for career development, teaching graduate biology is for undergraduate educators, Means to a Beginning is a compilation of grants, Academia Industry Transitions. This has not been released yet, but this will most likely come out next week. And as the name suggests, it speaks to those researchers who want to move between industry and academia, and many others. And again, I invite you all to check them out. And very special for today, since today is 8th March, International Day of Women in Science, I sort of wanted to highlight this particular publication, Spurti. Coincidentally, this was, I think, the first project that I was a part of that was completed after I joined India Bioscience. And Spurti is a e-booklet. It has conversations, it has interviews with a large group of scientists, female science communicators. It has articles, it has resources, it has a listing of grants, it has a timeline showing the history of women in science in India. And again, this is something that I would invite all of you to go and check out. Women as a community tend to suffer a lot from lack of visibility in science. I mean, the number of women who are part of the public discourse can probably be counted on one hand. However, there are many people quietly doing their work, and I really invite you to go and give this a try. And again, we are always looking to grow our community. The community is what defines us. India Bioscience, there are many different ways in which all of you can engage with us. We are always looking forward to more interactions. This is our team. These are the 8 women, coincidentally, who sort of sit in these 2 offices. So now we are working from home mostly. And this is our advisory board, which again, these are trailblazing scientists, both from within and outside India, and we're very lucky to have them. And finally, thank you for making time on a weekday at 4 p.m. to come and listen to me. And I hope that this has given you maybe a little morsel or a particle or some food for thought, some perspective of looking at things that you may not have thought about in a certain way before. And I'll end my talk here, and I'll be very happy to take any questions. Handing back to you, Pitasta.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya. Thank you for this insightful lecture and giving us the, the range of work that India Bioscience is involved in the interface of science and society. And we are open for questions now. Anyone can raise your hand, or you can type in your question in the chat box, and I can read it out. Yeah, Ranjini. Ranjini has a question. Unmute yourself, Ranjini.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Ranjini.
Hi Shreya, thank you so much for that great talk. I had a sort of a 1.5 part question. Would you say that India Bioscience has sort of flourished because there's a large biological sciences community in India? And are you aware of any similar initiatives or efforts that are happening or being thought of in other fields like physics or engineering? And if not, then what do you think it would take to replicate this kind of model in other fields in India, especially?
Yeah, so this is something that we have thought about a lot in the last several years. The reason India Bioscience started, or it began focusing on the biological sciences exclusively, is because it was built by life scientists, by a group of young biologists who decided to come together and create something like this. That being said, I don't think this is something unique in the sense that this cannot be replicated. I'm not aware of anything that operates on the same scale as India Bioscience in the physical sciences or engineering sciences or any of the other branches of science in India. But I see no reason why, if such an initiative was to come up, it wouldn't be successful. Think of India Bioscience as an experiment. It started 12 years ago. It tried to see whether something like this could be sustained, could be useful, could be a resource that is worth maintaining. And I think whatever we have seen over the 12 years confirms that yes, this is an experiment that can succeed. And hence this is a model that can perhaps be replicated. But what is needed for that replication is for the members of these communities, for people who are working in the physical sciences or those who are working in the chemical sciences, for some of them to come together first and sort of speak up that we need this within our community. I don't think it's the size of the life science community per se. I don't think there are more biologists in India than those working in other fields. But I think as a whole, collaborations are more widespread in biology than others. You cannot function without them. There are larger groups. There is more exchange of materials, infrastructure, and so on. So that might also have contributed to why this originated in the life science field and why this was set up. But I really look forward to seeing this replicated in other fields as well.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, also just wishing everyone a very happy International Women's Day, if there are women in the audience, or to all of you.
Yeah. Thank you, Shreya. Wish you the same. Yeah.
Thank you.
So can I ask one more question then, if that's
yes,
all right?
yes, Ranjani, go ahead.
So, in terms of what you are particularly focused on, science communication, right? So in the past 10 to 12 years that India Bioscience has been around, how would you say either interest or motivation and initiatives towards science communication how has it changed? Has it improved? Has it stayed the same? Are you hopeful that science communication will become a much bigger thing, in India? What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Ranjini. That's a great question. I can't speak of the whole 10-year history of India Bioscience, but I can speak about what I have seen in my 5 years as a science communicator. What I've seen is attitudes changing, definitely. Earlier, there's a mindset that a scientist who goes out and engages with the public or talks about their science in layman terms, they're not a serious enough scientist. And while this mindset still persists in a few places, I see a lot of researchers, both young and senior researchers, who have undergone a change in this, who are more willing to engage with the world at large. There is also more acceptance of science communication as a career option. I would say maybe the whole structure is not there yet for it to be a viable choice for a large body of people, but those structures are coming up now. Those ideas about where training would be given, where funding would come from, where we do have science communication as an integral part of every institute, every university, every media outlet. Those discussions at least are happening. And thirdly, I see a very rapidly growing interest in the part of the next generation of students, undergraduate, postgraduate, PhD students, and even postdocs in communicating science, in learning how to communicate science, whether that be as a career path or just in order to learn how to talk about their science with the world. So that is something I find very encouraging and a positive development.
Great.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Shreya, I have query, not a question. What drives science communication in India Bioscience? Because all of us in certain way are trying to communicate science, and we have our own motivation behind. But what is the motivation behind India Bioscience? I was curious to know whether it's the suspicion that the public has towards science and who are doing science, or it's something else.
Yeah. I guess it is a combination of factors, I would say. India Bioscience as an organization, its main focus is on community building and on empowering communities. And in our case, this community is the community of researchers and science professionals. And where we want science communication to help here, I mean, this is different from what maybe a science journalist's aim would be. But in our case, our main aim is to bring visibility to this community. We feel that if more scientists can be seen by more people, their research can be seen or read or heard by more people, it would automatically create a culture of science being an ordinary part of everyone's lives. It is not something exotic, not something that's just the domain of experts. It's not something that has no relevance to daily life. It is this line of thought, I think, that has led to the crisis of scientific temper in our society. We will see science as something very different. That's the domain of these people who are in their ivory towers, as I spoke about earlier. So one of the aims of science communication is to act as this equalizer, to make sure that it becomes normal, it becomes sort of accepted every day to talk about these things, talk about both about what science is accomplishing, what science can accomplish, and also about the scientific community. What are the challenges it faces? What do the people who are part of this community, what do they need, right? So I guess that is what drives us, India Bioscience as an organization. But there is again always the excitement of learning about something new and being able to speak about it.
Thank you, Shreya. Is there any question from anyone else?
So this is the final webinar in this series.
Yes,
right?
this is the last webinar in this series, and in 2 weeks' time we'll start another series.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I guess there's no more questions. So thank you, Shreya. Thank you for giving a very apt concluding webinar in this series, and we look forward to having you more, interacting more with the Office of Communication in the future. Thank you, Shreya.
Thanks, Vedasta.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.